We're diving into the hidden layers of the human mind, the dark instincts, silent games, and subtle power plays most people never talk about. This isn't fear, this is understanding. Dark psychology isn't evil, it's awareness. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. So close your eyes, breathe deep, and let your thoughts drift. Welcome to 1 hour of dark psychology to relax. The power of silence. How withholding words can control people more than speaking ever could. Silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. It's one of the most powerful psychological tools in human interaction, and it's the most underestimated. While most people rush to speak, to explain, to defend, the person who masters silence holds the real power, because silence isn't just an absence of noise, it's pressure, and pressure makes people uncomfortable. It makes them reveal things they wouldn't have said otherwise. That's where the control begins. When you go silent after someone insults you, it shatters their rhythm. They expected a reaction, maybe anger, maybe hurt. But when you give them nothing, their confidence cracks. Your silence becomes a mirror, and suddenly they're faced with themselves. They're left wondering if they crossed a line, if you're offended, if you don't care, or if you're planning something even worse. That uncertainty is where your control lives. In arguments, silence is deadly. Words create noise. They invite rebuttals, misinterpretation, escalation. But silence starves the fire. It forces the other person to fill the void, and they almost always overplay their hand. They reveal their insecurities, their real motivations, their desperation to be understood. When you say less, you see more. In relationships, silence is influence. When you stop over-explaining, over-apologizing, over-talking, people lean in. They start valuing your words because they don't come so easily. Silence builds mystery. It creates space, and space creates value. The person who's always available, always talking, always justifying, they get taken for granted. But the one who stays quiet, they stay on your mind. Think of every moment someone went cold on you, every time they left your message unseen, every time they didn't respond right away. You felt that silence, it lingered, it echoed. That's how powerful silence is. It doesn't need sound to be heard. It speaks directly to the mind, where all your overthinking begins. People fear silence because it exposes insecurity. Most people talk to avoid it. They fill conversations with noise just to feel in control. But when you stop talking, you take control. You say, "I don't need to convince you." And that confidence makes people listen when you finally do speak. Your silence adds weight to your voice. Silence is also a filter. It separates the patient from the impulsive, the real from the fake, the ones who respect you from the ones who just want something from you. Go silent long enough, and you'll see who chases, who waits, and who fades. That's not coincidence. That's clarity. In dark psychology, silence is used to destabilize, to disarm, and to dominate, without ever raising your voice. A single moment of silence after someone confesses something vulnerable can make them spiral. They'll assume judgment, rejection, disappointment, anything to fill that void. And if you stay calm, stay unreadable, they'll reveal even more. When someone's expecting a reaction and you give them stillness, they panic. That's when their mask slips. That's when their real face shows. Silence forces truth to surface. It squeezes the air out of false confidence. The louder someone speaks, the more fragile they often are. Silence is the test. In social groups, the silent person holds intrigue. They watch more than they speak. They understand more than they say. And when they do talk, it matters. Everyone stops, because silence breeds suspense. You don't need to command attention when you control presence. And nothing controls presence like purposeful silence. There's a difference between awkward silence and powerful silence. Awkward silence is random. It comes from uncertainty. But powerful silence is deliberate. It's timed. It's calculated. And when used with intention, it creates an invisible dominance. People don't even realize they're being pulled into your gravity, but they feel it. Sometimes the best way to expose someone is to stop reacting. If someone's trying to manipulate you, They rely on your emotional response. But silence, it's emotionally neutral. It gives them nothing to work with. And eventually, their tactics collapse. They get louder, more desperate, and suddenly, they're the only one on stage. Withholding words is a form of emotional control, not to punish, but to reclaim your power. Because once you realize you don't owe anyone an explanation, you stop trying to prove your worth. You stop negotiating with people who never had your best interest. You let your silence answer for you. Ever notice how silence after betrayal is more painful than shouting? When someone hurts you and you go quiet, it hits deeper than any insult ever could. Because silence communicates finality. It says, "You're not worth my energy." And that sentence, left unspoken, echoes louder than anything else. In dark psychology, silence is used in interrogation tactics. Why? Because silence makes people uncomfortable. It creates tension, and under tension, people talk. They confess, they explain, they crack. You don't have to threaten someone to make them spill. You just have to give them the space to drown in their own thoughts. Silence also builds resilience. The more comfortable you get with not responding, not chasing, not explaining, the more powerful you become. You're no longer tied to the reactions of others. You're not playing the game, you're observing it. And that shift in energy changes everything. The person who knows how to speak well is respected. But the person who knows when not to speak, that person is feared, because they're unpredictable. They're calm when they shouldn't be. And that calmness triggers people. It unsettles them. Because silence feels like something's about to happen, even when it's not. Use silence when someone tries to provoke you, when they try to push your buttons, when they expect you to rise to their level. Don't say nothing, just stare, breathe. Let the moment hang heavy. That pause, that moment of stillness, it says more than 1,000 comebacks ever could. In high-stakes situations, silence is a weapon. In negotiation, in conflict, in leadership, those who speak first often lose. The ability to stay silent while others flinch, fumble, or beg for your opinion, that's rare. And it makes you unpredictable, because people can't manipulate what they can't read. Silence also sharpens observation. When you stop talking, you start seeing. You notice the micro-expressions, the changes in tone, the body language. You hear what's not being said, and in that stillness, you find truth. Words lie, but silence listens. Sometimes, silence is compassion, letting someone sit with their thoughts, instead of rushing to rescue them. Not every silence is cold. Some are wise. Some say, "I trust you to figure it out." That's a different kind of power, the power to let people grow through discomfort. When you remove your words from someone's life, you become unforgettable, because people remember the silence. They remember the moment they couldn't reach you, the message left unread, the space you didn't fill. And in that silence they hear their own thoughts louder than ever. Withholding words also protects your energy. Not every opinion needs a response. Not every argument deserves your voice. Sometimes, silence is the boundary, the armor, the way you choose yourself. It's not weakness, it's restraint. And restraint is strength under control. Silence doesn't mean absence. It means presence without noise. It means choosing your battles, your moments, your words. And that choice, that's where the real power is. Because when you speak less, every word becomes sacred. Every sentence, a decision. Every pause, a message. And finally, silence is memory. Long after the conversation ends, people don't always remember what you said, but they always remember how quiet you became, how you didn't react, how you made them sit with the truth without giving them a distraction. That's power. That's psychological mastery. Trauma bonding. When pain feels like love, the twisted link between abuse and affection. Let's talk about something dark, but real. Something that feels like love, looks like obsession, and tastes like poison. Trauma bonding. The kind of connection that keeps people chained to pain, smiling through suffering, and calling it love. It's not romance. It's not devotion. It's survival wrapped in confusion. And once you understand it, you'll never fall for the same lies again. Trauma bonding doesn't happen overnight. It's not fireworks and roses. It's a slow burn. a game of reward and punishment. One day they give you heaven, the next they hand you hell, and just when you think you should leave, they give you a taste of the love again. That taste, that's the trap. Your brain can't tell the difference between love and danger when the two are constantly mixed. That's the trick. The pain becomes normal, the apologies start feeling like affection, and every small act of kindness, after days of silence, gaslighting, or cruelty, feels like a miracle. It's not love, it's withdrawal and relief, repeated until you forget what peace ever felt like. People don't stay because they're weak, they stay because they're hooked. Trauma bonding activates the same chemicals as addiction: dopamine from the highs, cortisol from the stress, oxytocin from the apologies, and all of it loops together like a drug. You're not addicted to the person, you're addicted to the pattern. The worst part, you start blaming yourself. You think, maybe I'm the problem, because the abuser teaches you to doubt your own reality. They flip the script, make you apologize for reacting to the hurt they caused, and eventually you're the one trying to fix what they keep breaking. That's how deep the bond goes. It's not always screaming and slamming doors. Sometimes it's subtle, silent treatments, guilt trips, gaslighting, manipulation dressed as concern. I'm doing this because I love you. No, you're doing it because you want control. But when love gets tied to pain, even control feels like affection. Trauma bonds are forged in confusion. One day they praise you, the next they ignore you. One moment they hold you like you're everything, the next they treat you like you're nothing. And your brain clings to the good moments like a lifeline, hoping they'll come back, ignoring the damage in between. You don't just bond with their kindness, you bond with the chaos. You start seeing the pain as passion, the silence as depth, the intensity as proof. But real love doesn't hurt like that. Real love doesn't leave you questioning your worth. It doesn't make you chase apologies for wounds you never deserved. What's scary is how normal it starts to feel, how the roller coaster becomes your comfort zone. You crave the adrenaline, the drama, the false peace, and the idea of a calm, stable love that feels boring. That's how trauma bonds destroy your compass. They make dysfunction feel like home. You start mistaking anxiety for chemistry, jealousy for care, control for attention, the butterflies in your stomach. That's not romance, it's survival mode. It's your nervous system screaming that something's wrong, but you've learned to call it love, because that's what they taught you. Breaking a trauma bond feels like detoxing. Your body shakes, your heart doubts, your mind races, because you're not just walking away from a person, you're walking away from the only version of love you've known. And that version, even if it was twisted, felt real. They made you feel special, just enough, broken, just enough, needed, just enough. That's how they keep the leash tight. Not too cruel to make you leave, not too kind to make you feel safe, just enough chaos to keep you spinning. And in that spin, they stay in control. Trauma bonding isn't about stupidity, it's about survival. Your brain clings to the bond because breaking it feels dangerous. You fear the loneliness. You fear the silence. You fear what it means to be without them. Even if they were the source of your pain, that fear is how they win. You tell yourself, they weren't always like this, and you're right, they weren't. That's what makes it harder. You remember the version of them who smiled, who held your hand, who said the right things. But that version, that was the bait. The real them is who shows up when they think they've got you. It's easy to say, just leave. But when you're trauma bonded, leaving feels like betrayal. But of the hope you still carry, the hope that they'll change, that things will go back to how they were, that the good times weren't just manipulation. That hope keeps you stuck longer than any chain ever could. You learn to tiptoe, to calculate, to stay small, because you never know which version of them you'll get today. And that hypervigilance, that's trauma, not love. You shouldn't have to earn peace. You shouldn't have to work for basic respect. But in a trauma bond, everything is conditional. Sometimes, the trauma bond continues even after they're gone. You still think about them, still miss them, still feel pulled back in. That's normal. That's the addiction. You're not missing them. You're missing the relief after the pain, the calm after the storm. But storms always return. You may even defend them. They had a hard life. They didn't mean it. They're just damaged. Maybe they are, but that doesn't excuse the damage they caused you. Compassion for others should never come at the cost of yourself. You can understand their pain without staying in it. The healing starts when you stop chasing closure, when you stop trying to make sense of their behavior, when you realize the closure you need isn't something they give, it's something you choose. The day you stop trying to fix what broke you is the day you begin again. Sometimes, love has to look like silence, like distance, like blocking them, even if it hurts, because healing doesn't feel good at first. It feels like grief, like loss, but underneath that loss is freedom, and underneath that freedom, peace. A kind of peace you forgot was possible. Once the trauma bond breaks, clarity rushes in. You see the games, the manipulation, the guilt, and you wonder how you ever accepted it. But don't shame yourself. You weren't stupid. You were loyal. You loved hard. And that love was used against you. But now it's yours again. True love doesn't play hide and seek with your soul. It doesn't punish, control, or confuse. It feels safe, seen, understood. Not always perfect, but never abusive. The moment you taste that kind of love, you'll never settle for pain disguised as affection again. Trauma bonding steals your voice. Healing is how you take it back. It's in the quiet moments, the small boundaries, the nights you don't text back, the days you choose peace over passion. Every time you protect your energy, you rebuild the love you once gave away. And eventually, you stop craving the chaos. You stop checking your phone. You stop replaying old conversations. The pain softens, the bond breaks, and in its place you find yourself, the version of you that doesn't need to earn love by suffering for it. So if you're stuck right now, caught between love and pain, breathe. You're not crazy. You're not weak. You're bonded, and bonds can break, not with force, but with truth, with space, with time. The moment you choose yourself, the cycle ends, and that is real power. Mind games in relationships. The silent strategies used to dominate intimacy. Let's sit in the dark for a while and talk about something most people feel but can't quite explain. Mind games in relationships. Not the screaming matches, not the slammed doors, but the silence, the subtle shifts, the things that don't look like manipulation, but feel like control. The emotional chessboard where love becomes leverage and affection becomes ammunition. It doesn't start with lies. It starts with questions, little doubts that slip in unnoticed. Why didn't you answer your phone? Who were you texting? You used to make more time for me. It sounds like concern, but it's strategy. It's a slow dismantling of your confidence, cloaked in care. And the more you try to explain yourself, the more power they gain. Mind games aren't always loud. Sometimes, it's the quiet that speaks the loudest. A sudden mood shift, a delayed response, a cold shoulder. You ask what's wrong, and they say, nothing. But the tension in the air tells a different story. That's the trap. They control the atmosphere, and you scramble to fix what they won't even admit is broken. Then there's the comparison game. My ex never did that. You used to be more fun. Other people treat their partners better. They don't attack you directly. They make you question your worth. They don't ask you to change. They suggest that maybe someone else would have been better. And suddenly, you're trying to earn what you should have already had. Respect. Ever feel like you're walking on eggshells? That's not love. That's emotional control. They don't have to yell. They just have to pause long enough, sigh deep enough, look disappointed just enough. It trains you, conditions you. You start rehearsing every word before you say it, not because you're afraid, but because you're being played. Gaslighting is one of the dirtiest mind games. They hurt you, then make you doubt the pain. I never said that. You're overreacting. You're too sensitive. They don't just twist reality, they rewrite it. And the more you try to hold on to the truth, the more insane they make you feel for doing so. one of the coldest tricks, withholding affection, not just sex, but compliments, kindness, touch. They turn off the warmth and wait. Watch how fast you bend. You start thinking, what did I do wrong? But you didn't do anything. That's the point. The punishment has no rules. That way you're always on edge. Sometimes they give you just enough to stay. A kind word, a thoughtful gesture, a good morning text out of nowhere. It feels like love, but it's not. It's a reset, a bait, a breadcrumb trail that leads back into the maze, and you follow it, hoping this time it'll be different. But it never is. Emotional baiting is another trap. They hint at a breakup, act distant, say things like, maybe we're not meant for each other, not to leave, but to watch you panic. They want to see how fast you'll chase, how deeply you'll beg, how much control they really have. And when you fall to pieces, they soothe you, like a hero, like a savior, like a manipulator. Then there's jealousy, manufactured jealousy. They talk about someone else, laugh too loud at another's joke, bring up old flings, not because they're careless, but because they're testing you, seeing how far they can go, seeing if you'll react. Because your reaction, that's their validation. They want your emotions on a leash, the highs, the lows, the doubts, the fears. They provoke them, then pretend they didn't. And when you finally explode, they say, you're the toxic one. That's the genius of mind games. They make you look like the problem. You become the emotional one. You carry the blame. Emotional mirroring is another subtle trick. At first, they reflect your best parts, your humor, your dreams, your softness. You think, we're soulmates. But later they mirror your flaws, your insecurities, your weakest moments. They throw your own wounds back in your face, not to heal them, but to own them. They use time as a weapon too. Suddenly, they're too busy, unavailable, not responding like they used to. You ask if something's wrong, and they say, you're imagining things. But you're not. You feel the withdrawal, and that silence. It's a strategy. It makes you chase, makes you prove your value. Again, they don't always insult you outright. Sometimes, it's a compliment with a hook. You're pretty for someone your age. You're smarter than you look. These comments sting, but they're said with a smile. And that smile makes you question the pain. So you brush it off. But that's how they win, one dig at a time. Mind games are about imbalance, about control. And the more you play, the more you lose. Because it's not about love for them, it's about dominance. They want to win, and every time you shrink, doubt, beg, or explain, they do. You begin to confuse attention with affection, drama with passion, manipulation with intensity. But real love doesn't make you feel exhausted. Real love doesn't leave you anxious after every conversation. Real love is not a game. It's not a battlefield. It's a home. They say they're just being honest. But honesty without empathy is cruelty. And when every truth they offer is laced with superiority, judgment, or control, it's not honesty. It's a tactic, a performance, a way to cut you and call it candor. Then there's the apology game. They mess up. You confront them. They apologize. But only after you break down. Only after you cry, you beg, you suffer. The apology is never about your pain. It's about keeping you hooked, reeling you back in just enough to reset the cycle. You start noticing patterns. Arguments always happen when you succeed, when you shine, when you start pulling away. That's not coincidence, it's sabotage. Because your independence is a threat, your strength disrupts their control, so they stir the pot just to pull you back down. Ever notice how they make you question your friends, your family? They don't understand us. They're jealous of what we have. It's not about love, it's isolation. Because if you lose your outside support, you only have one person left to lean on. And that person is them. Sometimes, they play the victim. Suddenly, they're the ones who were hurt. They're misunderstood. They had a rough childhood. And sure, maybe they did. But trauma isn't an excuse for emotional warfare. You can feel for someone without letting them destroy you. In these relationships, you start to lose your reflection, who you are, what you believe, what you want, because you're so busy managing their moods, their mind games, their maze of manipulation, you forget yourself. And when you finally wake up, you don't recognize who you've become. But here's the truth. Man, once you see the games, you don't unsee them. The manipulation only works when you're confused, when you believe it's love, when you think you're broken. But once you understand the rules, you stop playing. And when you stop playing, they lose. You take back your silence, your time, your mind. You rebuild boundaries that were eroded, brick by brick. You relearn how to speak without fear, how to love without bending, how to breathe without waiting for the next mood swing. That's freedom, that's peace, that's power. Learned behavior from childhood trauma, the roots of darkness planted early. Let's talk about something that hides in plain sight, something that doesn't shout, doesn't rage, doesn't burn. It just lingers, quiet, invisible, but always there. The way we react to pain, the way we flinch at love, the way we choose chaos when peace is available. It's not always a conscious choice. Sometimes it's just learned. A survival script written in childhood, the kind of script you never agreed to, but followed anyway. That's the thing about trauma. It teaches you how to survive, not how to live. Some kids grow up in homes where love has conditions. Be good and I'll praise you. Do as I say, or I'll withhold affection. That's not love, that's training. And it teaches the child a dangerous lesson. You must earn love. You must perform, please. Stay small, stay quiet. And even as an adult, you find yourself repeating the same patterns, over-explaining, over-apologizing, chasing approval like it's oxygen. Because somewhere deep down, you still believe love isn't something you deserve. It's something you have to fight for. Other kids grow up with chaos, yelling, doors slamming, moods changing, like weather. They learn to anticipate danger, read the room, walk on eggshells. Hypervigilance becomes normal. So later in life, when someone is calm, kind, consistent, it feels foreign, boring, even. You don't trust it. You crave the adrenaline of dysfunction, because that's what love felt like back then. And that's what trauma does. It warps your emotional compass. And then there's emotional neglect, the kind of pain that doesn't leave bruises. Parents who were physically present, but emotionally absent. You cried, but no one comforted you. You succeeded, but no one celebrated. You needed, but no one noticed. So you learn to self-soothe, to stay silent, to expect nothing. And now you feel guilty for having needs at all. You dismiss your emotions before anyone else can. You say, I'm fine, when you're not. Because asking for help still feels like a risk. Some people grow up in homes where affection is mixed with fear, where the same hand that holds you can also hit you. That kind of confusion runs deep. You learn that love is painful, that being close to someone also means being hurt by them. And so, in adulthood, you recreate that dynamic. You chase people who hurt you. You stay with partners who break you, not because you're weak, but because your blueprint for love was corrupted from the start. Even perfectionism can be a trauma response. Maybe as a kid, mistakes weren't allowed. You were shamed for failing, compared to siblings, told you had to be the best. So now, you overachieve. You don't rest. You don't celebrate. You just keep striving, thinking maybe this time you'll be enough. But the finish line keeps moving, and peace always feels just out of reach. People pleasing, that's a survival tactic too. Maybe your home was unpredictable. Maybe your parents' moods dictated your safety. So you learn to become small, agreeable, non-threatening. You made yourself likable because you thought likable meant lovable. And now, you can't say no without guilt. You lose yourself in relationships. You give more than you get every time. Because pleasing others feels safer than being yourself. Even emotional detachment can be traced back to childhood. Maybe you were overwhelmed. Maybe no one ever showed you how to process big feelings. So you shut down, numbed out, became the strong one. And now, you don't cry, you don't share, you don't open up. Because vulnerability still feels dangerous, even when you're safe. Some people become caretakers way too early. Maybe a parent was sick, or struggling, or simply incapable. So you stepped up. You grew up fast. You became responsible, mature, dependable, and everyone praised you for it. But no one asked if you were okay. And now, as an adult, you take care of everyone but yourself. You feel guilty resting. You don't know how to receive, because your worth was tied to what you could do, not who you were. Anger too can be a mask for pain. If you were never allowed to be sad, if your tears were mocked or punished, you might have learned that rage was safer, louder, stronger. And now, you explode instead of breaking down. You yell instead of crying, because anger gives you control, but it also keeps people away. And that's the paradox. You want connection, but your defenses push it away. Some people become emotionally numb. They don't feel highs or lows. They exist in a gray zone, disconnected, distracted, half alive. That's not laziness. That's trauma, frozen in time. It's the nervous system still stuck in survival mode. And healing doesn't mean forcing joy. It means thawing, feeling, learning to be alive again, one breath at a time. You might find yourself constantly trying to fix broken people, drawn to partners with trauma, addiction, chaos. It's not coincidence. It's reenactment. You're trying to rewrite your past, hoping that if you can save them, you'll finally feel safe yourself. But it doesn't work like that. Healing doesn't come from fixing others. It comes from facing your own pain. Even silence can be learned behavior. Maybe you were punished for speaking out, or told your feelings were too much, so you stopped talking. Now, you hide your truth. You don't confront. You don't ask for clarity. You suffer quietly, thinking that's noble. But silence isn't strength when it's rooted in fear. You may have learned to ignore red flags, because in your childhood, every flag was red. You got used to dysfunction, normalized chaos. And now, when someone is toxic, your alarm bells don't ring. They whisper, or worse, they stay silent, because the danger feels familiar, and familiarity feels like home. Even your sense of humor can be armor. You joke about your pain, laugh at your trauma, play the clown, because if you can make others laugh, maybe they won't look too closely. Maybe they won't ask what's really hurting. Humor becomes your shield, and behind the laughs, loneliness, exhaustion, fear. You might be fiercely independent, refusing help, refusing closeness, saying I don't need anyone. But that's not confidence, that's defense. Maybe the people who were supposed to be there for you weren't. So now, you rely on no one. But deep down, you still crave connection. You just don't know how to trust it. Sometimes you sabotage good things, push away love, destroy peace, not because you want chaos, but because chaos is familiar. Calm feels suspicious, love feels fake, so you ruin what's real before it can ruin you. That's not self-destruction, that's protection. It's your wounded inner child pulling the fire alarm before the house burns. Even procrastination can be traced back to trauma. Maybe you were punished for mistakes. Maybe failure brought shame. So now, you freeze, you delay, you don't start, because if you don't start, you can't fail. And you tell yourself you're lazy, but it's not laziness. It's fear, wearing a different name, over-apologizing. That's another one. You say sorry for existing, for feeling, for taking up space. Because somewhere along the way, you were made to believe your presence was a problem. So now, you shrink, apologize, disappear. And the saddest part, you don't even realize you're doing it. You might attract emotionally unavailable people, cold, distant, withholding. Because that's what love felt like growing up, conditional, incomplete. And you think if you can just earn their love, it'll mean you finally deserved it. But that's not love. That's repetition, trauma in disguise. Some people overshare as a defense. They tell you their whole life story in the first hour. Trauma dump without boundaries. Not because they trust you, but because they want control. If they share everything first, you can't hurt them with it later. That's not connection, that's protection. Finally, you might find yourself always feeling too much, too emotional, too intense, too needy. That's not a flaw. That's feedback from people who couldn't handle your depth, who shamed your sensitivity. And now, you carry that shame into every relationship. But here's the truth. You were never too much. They were just too empty. The mind's attraction to taboo. Why the forbidden is often the most tempting. Gay. Let's talk about the shadows. Not the kind that scare you, but the kind that pull you in. The thoughts you're not supposed to have. The desires you pretend don't exist. The curiosity that whispers when the world demands silence. That's the thing about taboos. They don't disappear when you avoid them. They grow louder, sharper, more seductive, because the mind is a strange place, and nothing tempts it more than what it's told to stay away from. Imagine someone tells you not to look behind a curtain. You weren't even thinking about the curtain, but now it's all you can focus on. That's the nature of forbidden things. The moment something is off limits, it becomes interesting, not because it's valuable, but because it's hidden, and your mind doesn't like being told what it can't explore. It doesn't like blind spots. It wants to know, even if the knowing is dangerous. Taboo ignites imagination. It builds a world out of absence. If you're told not to touch something, you start picturing what it must feel like. You imagine the taste of forbidden fruit, the thrill of forbidden love, the heat of a forbidden thought. The mind fills in the blanks, and often, it fills them with fire. You're not just curious, you're addicted to the mystery, and the unknown is always more thrilling than the familiar. There's a reason the most repressed societies often have the darkest secrets. The more you suppress, the more pressure builds beneath the surface. When you lock desire in a cage, it doesn't die, it evolves. It becomes sharper, more persistent, more uncontrollable. Repression is not the opposite of obsession. Sometimes it's the cause. From a young age, we're taught what's acceptable and what isn't, what's normal and what's wrong. And somewhere along the way, curiosity becomes shame. You don't stop thinking those thoughts, you just learn to hide them. But hidden doesn't mean gone, it just means louder on the inside. That's how taboo lives, not out in the open, but in the dark corners of your private world. Sometimes what we want most isn't what we need, it's what we've been denied. The person you can't have, the place you're not allowed to go, the truth you're not supposed to speak. That denial creates hunger, and the more you resist, the stronger it grows. Desire, when denied, doesn't fade, it burns, and the longer it burns, the harder it is to put out. Taboo has a way of making you feel alive, not because it's moral or healthy, but because it breaks routine. It defies control. It reminds you that you're still wild beneath all the polite layers. In a world that constantly tells you to obey, behave, conform, taboo says, what if you didn't? And that tiny whisper is enough to start a fire. Even in relationships, taboo plays a role, flirting with the line, wanting what's off limits, being drawn to danger, drama, or dysfunction, not because it's good for you, but because it feels real, raw, unfiltered. Sometimes we mistake intensity for intimacy. We confuse chaos with chemistry, because the forbidden often wears the mask of passion. There's a psychological thrill in the idea of getting away with it, not in the criminal sense, but in the emotional one. Saying what you're not supposed to say, feeling what you were told was wrong, crossing lines in your mind, just to see what's on the other side. That's the power of taboo. It tempts your inner rebel, the part of you that refuses to be tamed. Taboo also exposes what society tries to hide, the truths we're not ready to face, the parts of humanity we've labeled as bad or broken. But those parts still exist. Denying them doesn't erase them, it just forces them underground. And what lives in the dark always finds a way to resurface. Think about how many stories, films, books, and songs are rooted in taboo. Affairs, secrets, betrayals, forbidden love. It's not an accident. Those themes strike a chord because they reflect something deep inside us. Not necessarily what we act on, but what we wonder about. Art becomes a safe space to explore what life doesn't allow. Taboo often reveals your unconscious mind. You might not understand why you're drawn to certain things, why you dream of chaos, why you feel alive in danger. But the mind remembers things your consciousness has forgotten. It stores past pain, early conditioning, repressed urges, and sometimes it lets them slip through dreams, fantasies, or impulses. And those moments feel strange because they're you, but not the you show the world. Some taboos are born from trauma. If you grew up in a home where emotions were forbidden, you might crave emotional explosions. If you were taught that pleasure was shameful, you might obsess over it. Not because you're broken, but because part of you is trying to reclaim what was stolen. Sometimes obsession is just the mind trying to heal. Even fear can create fascination. When something scares you, it also intrigues you. You want to understand it, control it, Maybe even get close enough to see if it's as dangerous as it seems. That's why people slow down when they pass a car crash. Not because they enjoy suffering, but because pain is a mirror. And sometimes it reflects something you're too afraid to look at head on. Taboo doesn't always mean immoral. Sometimes it just means unspoken. The things we don't discuss, the emotions we suppress, the instincts we deny. But denying something doesn't make it disappear. It just gives it more power. And eventually it finds a way to speak, whether through dreams, slips of the tongue, or choices that don't make sense until much later. There's a tension between desire and guilt. Wanting something you shouldn't want. Feeling drawn to something that makes you question your identity. That tension is where taboo lives. And that tension is powerful. It can break people or transform them. Because facing your darkness doesn't mean becoming it. It means understanding it, owning it, integrating it. Some of the most profound personal breakthroughs come from facing what you fear most in yourself. The thoughts you've buried, the memories you avoid, the truths you're scared to admit. Taboo isn't about indulgence, it's about honesty. The courage to say, this is also part of me. Even in love, taboo plays its games. The ex you can't forget, the crush you never spoke about, the tension between what's safe and what's wild. Sometimes we love from a distance because getting too close would burn, but that heat is intoxicating. Because forbidden love isn't always about the other person. It's about the version of you that comes alive around them. The mind is drawn to contrast, light and shadow, control and chaos. Light and shadow, control and chaos, peace and passion. Taboo represents the contrast we crave. The dark note in a beautiful song, the spice in an otherwise bland dish. It adds flavor, depth, meaning. Without it, life can feel flat. But too much of it, and it becomes a fire that consumes everything. You don't have to act on every taboo thought to understand it. Sometimes, just sitting with it, without judgment, is enough. Ask yourself, why am I drawn to this? What does this say about what I need, what I lack, what I fear? Those answers aren't always comfortable, but they're honest. The answers aren't always comfortable, but they're honest. And honesty is how you grow. Even society's rules change. What was once taboo becomes normal, and what was normal becomes taboo. That shift tells you something important. Taboo is often about timing, not truth. It reflects culture, not character. So before you shame yourself for what you feel, ask, is this wrong, or just unspoken? Taboo forces you to confront duality. You're not just good or bad, you're both. Capable of kindness and cruelty, compassion and jealousy, light and dark, and that's okay. You're not meant to be perfect. You're meant to be whole, and being whole means facing the parts you were told to hide. So the next time you feel drawn to something forbidden, pause, not to run, not to judge, but to listen, because maybe, just maybe, it's not temptation. Maybe it's a part of you asking to be seen. Fear of abandonment, the root of neediness. When being alone feels like death, let's talk about that feeling you never admit out loud. Oh, the one that creeps in when the room gets quiet. The one that whispers, what if they leave? It doesn't matter who they are. Someone you love, someone you need, someone who makes you feel like you matter. Deep down, you fear that one day they'll disappear, walk out, stop calling, ghost you, and it won't be just sad, it'll feel like death. That's the fear of abandonment, and it runs deeper than most people realize. It starts early. Maybe your parents were physically there, but emotionally absent. Maybe they left, or maybe they stayed, but only conditionally, only when you were good. As a kid, you didn't understand what was happening. You just felt it. You learned that love could vanish, that comfort wasn't guaranteed, that your worth was tied to someone else's presence. And so your mind wired itself for survival. Stay close. Don't upset them. Don't be alone. But the problem is that fear never really leaves. You grow up, you get older, but inside, you're still that kid watching the door, wondering if someone will walk out of your life and never come back. And that terror doesn't look like terror. It looks like texting too much. It looks like apologizing when you didn't do anything wrong. It looks like trying too hard, giving too much, loving too fast. You call it love, but underneath, it's fear. That fear turns into neediness, but not the kind people mock in memes. This is deep, raw, invisible neediness. It's not about constant attention, it's about constant reassurance. You want proof they care, that they're not bored, that you didn't mess up. You want them to stay, and so you overcompensate. You try to be perfect, to anticipate their moods, to never be a burden, but in trying to hold them tight, you often push them away. You start performing for love, acting the way you think they want, silencing your own needs, your own pain, just to keep the connection alive. You become addicted to their approval, their presence, their words, because every moment they pull away, even just a little, feels like drowning, like your whole identity is slipping through your fingers. And here's the twisted part. The more you fear abandonment, the more you attract it, not because you deserve to be left, but because you're operating from fear, not strength. And fear has a scent. It makes you shrink. It makes you chase. It makes you tolerate things you shouldn't. You stay in toxic relationships just so you won't be alone. You mistake attention for affection, control for care, drama for depth. You start confusing pain for passion. The highs and lows feel intoxicating because at least they mean something's happening. At least you're not being ignored. You tell yourself the chaos means they care. But really, it's just the storm you've grown used to. And peace feels empty because peace is unfamiliar. Peace feels like disconnection, like silence before the abandonment. You crave closeness but sabotage it. You test people, push them away just to see if they'll come back. You don't trust love when it's consistent. You keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the betrayal, for the exit. And so you never fully relax. You're constantly scanning for danger, reading between lines, doubting everything. And it's exhausting. Fear of abandonment makes you hypervigilant. A delayed reply feels like rejection. A missed call feels like punishment. Their bad mood feels like your fault. And you internalize it all. You blame yourself. You try harder, but no matter what you do, the fear still lingers. Because the real wound isn't in the present. It's buried in the past. Sometimes you'll even sabotage good things, because staying feels more dangerous than leaving. Intimacy exposes you, makes you vulnerable, and vulnerability feels unsafe. So you start fights, pull away, pretend you don't care, not because you want to lose them, but because you want to control the loss. It's less painful to leave first than to be left behind. But here's the truth. The fear of abandonment isn't about other people. It's about you. It's about the part of you that still doesn't believe you're enough on your own. The part that thinks love must be earned, that presence must be bought, that connection only comes when you sacrifice yourself. And until you heal that belief, no relationship will feel safe. You have to face the fear, not run from it. Sit with the loneliness, not numb it, not chase someone to fix it. Just be with it. Listen to it. Let it speak. Because behind that fear is a wounded version of you that just wants to be seen, not fixed, not shamed, just seen. And once you do that, something powerful happens. The fear starts to lose its grip. You realize you don't need to chase people to keep them. You don't need to bend to be loved. You don't need to exhaust yourself trying to prevent someone from leaving. Because if they do leave, it won't destroy you. Not anymore. You'll feel it. You'll grieve. But you won't collapse. You won't disappear. Because you've found something stronger than reassurance. You've found self-trust. Neediness dissolves when you believe you can survive without them. Not because you want to lose them, but because you know you'll be okay if you do. That kind of inner peace is magnetic. It's the opposite of desperation. And it's not about being cold or distant. It's about being whole, rooted, stable, unshaken by absence. Fear of abandonment tricks you into thinking love must hurt. That attachment means anxiety. But real love doesn't feel like waiting for the next goodbye. Real love is calm, steady, and most importantly, it doesn't ask you to sacrifice your sanity just to stay connected. You are not broken for wanting closeness. You're human, but you are also not powerless. The fear that once protected you is now limiting you. It's keeping you stuck in cycles of overgiving, overthinking, and overlooking yourself. And the moment you stop needing people to stay in order to feel worthy, that's when you'll attract the ones who want to stay. Sometimes the deepest healing comes from being alone, not because solitude is easy, but because it teaches you how to stand without support, how to love yourself in the silence, how to soothe your own fears instead of outsourcing them to someone else. That's not weakness, that's strength, and it's rare. You'll notice something beautiful when the fear fades. Your relationships become freer. You stop clinging, you stop controlling, you start showing up authentically, without panic. And that makes you more lovable, not less, because nothing is more attractive than someone who loves from abundance, not lack. So the next time you feel that panic rise, the terror of being alone, pause, breathe. Remind yourself, I've survived every goodbye so far. I'm still here. I'm still whole. The fear may whisper, but it doesn't have to drive. You're allowed to need people, but you're not dependent on them for your identity. That's where your power lives. Right there in the space where silence meets self-worth. The death of curiosity. How society kills the questioning mind to preserve control. Have you ever felt it? That moment when a question bubbles up in your mind, something raw, honest, maybe even uncomfortable, and instead of exploring it, you swallow it down, you shrug it off. You tell yourself, it's probably not that important, but deep down, it is. That question was alive, it was real, but the world around you, school, family, media, authority, taught you that asking too many questions makes you dangerous, or worse, inconvenient. And over time, the world doesn't even have to silence you, because you've learned to silence yourself. You weren't born that way. You were born curious. As a kid, you asked everything. Why is the sky blue? Why do people lie? Why do adults pretend to be happy when they're not? And maybe, at first you got answers, but eventually you got punished, or ignored, or laughed at. Teachers said, that's not on the test. Parents said, because I said so. Religion said, don't question God. And slowly, the light inside you dimmed. You learned that questioning made people uncomfortable, and that discomfort made them retreat or attack. So you adapted. You learned to play the game, memorize the answers, pass the tests, numb the spark. You stopped wondering what was real and started memorizing what was acceptable. You lost your hunger for the unknown, because the world told you that survival depends on obedience, not understanding. That success comes from compliance, not curiosity. And the scariest part, you started believing it. But the truth is, curiosity is the most subversive force in existence. It's what makes you free, because curiosity doesn't care about rules. It doesn't care about authority. It doesn't care about what's allowed. It wants to know. It wants to dig, uncover, disrupt. And that makes it dangerous. That's why society works so hard to kill it. Because a curious mind can't be controlled. And control is the only thing the system truly values. Look around. From a young age, you're placed into a structure designed to shape you into a worker, not a thinker. You're rewarded for regurgitation, not exploration. You're praised for fitting in, not standing out. Schools don't teach you how to think. They teach you what to think. And if you challenge that, you're labeled a problem, a distraction, a rebel. They clip your wings and call it discipline. And it doesn't stop in school. It follows you into adulthood. You're given a script. Get a job. Buy a house. Don't rock the boat. Don't question the news. Don't question your leaders. Don't question the rules. And if you do, you're branded a conspiracy theorist, a troublemaker, someone who thinks too much. But maybe the real problem is that everyone else stopped thinking entirely. Even your entertainment is engineered to dull your curiosity. Scrolling through endless feeds, watching predictable shows, binging surface-level stories that give you answers without ever asking real questions. It's not entertainment, it's sedation. It's comfort food for the brain, and it keeps you distracted just long enough to forget the spark that once lived inside you. But sometimes, In the quiet moments, late at night, or alone in your thoughts, that spark returns. A thought appears, a strange, uncomfortable idea, something that challenges what you've been told. And in that moment, you feel a choice: follow it or bury it. And most people, they bury it, not because they're weak, but because they've been trained to fear their own mind. That fear is learned. It's injected into you slowly. Don't ask why your job feels empty. Just be grateful you have one. Don't question why you feel numb. Just take the pill. Don't ask if the system is broken. Just play your part. It's a quiet death, not of the body, but of the soul. The death of curiosity is the death of self-awareness, of freedom, of meaning. Because once curiosity dies, all that's left is routine, repetition, obedience. You become a machine running someone else's code. And the saddest part, you forget that you were ever anything more. You stop wondering, you stop questioning, you stop seeking, and you call that peace. But it's not peace, it's sedation. It's the dull comfort of a locked cell. You were not made to be passive. You were made to explore, to ask why things are the way they are, to break patterns, to see deeper. That's why children look at the world with awe, and adults look with exhaustion. Because somewhere along the way, the awe was replaced with apathy, and we called that growing up. But what if we called it what it really is? A slow death, a killing of the inner rebel, a numbing of the spark. Because society doesn't need thinkers, it needs cogs. And every question you ask threatens the machine. So they teach you to trade your curiosity for convenience, your wonder for wage, your soul for survival. But here's the twist: they can't actually kill curiosity. They can only bury it. And buried things don't die. They wait, they simmer, they whisper. And one day they rise. That weird thought you had at 3 a.m., that nagging sense something is off, that's your curiosity trying to resurface, trying to remind you who you were before the world told you who to be. So listen to it, follow it, let it guide you into discomfort, into doubt, into the unknown. That's where freedom lives, not in answers, but in the willingness to ask, not in certainty, but in the courage to wonder. Because when you start asking again, you reclaim your mind, you reclaim your power. Curiosity isn't just about knowledge, it's about resistance. It's the refusal to accept the world as it is. It's the quiet rebellion of the mind. And in a world that depends on blind obedience, that rebellion is sacred. It's the most dangerous, beautiful thing you can do, to ask why, to ask what if, to ask what else. And no, it won't always be comfortable. The truth rarely is, but it will be real, and realness is rare. In a world of illusions, a curious mind is the only thing that cuts through the noise, that sees beyond the masks, that asks, who benefits from my silence? And when you start asking that, everything changes. You'll lose some people, some beliefs, some illusions, but you'll gain yourself, your mind, your fire. And once you've tasted that, you can't go back, because now you've seen it. The lies, the conditioning, the fear, and more importantly, the freedom on the other side of it. So if you've ever felt weird for asking too many questions, for digging too deep, for wondering too much, good. That means you're still alive. That means the system didn't win. That means your curiosity survived. And that's all you need to start the fire again. Because once curiosity returns, everything else follows. The wonder, the courage, the self-respect. And in that space, you become untouchable. Not because you have all the answers, but because you're not afraid to keep asking the questions.